Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the SDG 7 Pavilion this afternoon. We're hosting a panel today talking about the importance of innovation in leaving no one behind. Sorry, apologies, technical difficulties. A successful and inclusive energy transition that delivers universal access to affordable, reliable, efficient, and clean modern energy services needs to consider a diverse range of socio-economic situations that are currently experienced by those who are currently under or unserved in their energy needs. In today's session, we'll explore a diverse range of use cases that need to be addressed to ensure that no one is left behind. From those living in areas where there is a weak urban grid, to those where blackouts are a frequent occurrence, and to humanitarian settings where there is a heavy reliance on diesel or biomass generation for basic energy needs. We'll explore the need for innovation to meet these challenges in terms of technologies, business models, and funding mechanisms. Let me hand over to Joelle Hangi to tell us all about her first-hand experience. Joelle?
Given this opportunity to share my experience, also share what energy looks like in displacement context. And talking about displaced people, here we are talking about 102 million people who are currently displaced across the globe, and also 21.7 million people who are forced to cross border for security reasons and also other reasons. By coming to my own experience, living in a camp for more than now 10 years, I think I really have seen a lot in terms of intervention, in terms of projects that have been, taking place and failing to address the real issue or the real need of displaced people. And bear with me if I can just share with you some of the things that have been, in my mind for quite long. It's really looks negative, but I think it's really drawn from my own experience, seeing things happening and failing to address the issue. And for quite long, I used to believe that the energy situation of people or displaced community will never come to an end, or it will never be addressed effectively, only because have seen people who are really, suffering and desperately looking for solution to address their energy needs, and intervention coming in and failing to address those needs. But fortunately, let me say, more recently, I also come to take or questioning some of the things happening around me. Also, the different intervention in order to understand what is not really working and why things are not working. And I'm happy to share this with you. A few minutes, coming by. Let me say, in terms of, cooking energy, for example, this is one key element when it comes to energy access in displacement context. And from the recent work that was conducted by the Chatham House, 81% of displaced people lack any other option apart from, basic cooking fuel. And here we are talking about firewood and charcoal for those who are really privileged, because even having charcoal needs a certain level of income for you to, access it. And this the situation, or this situation that refugees are living in, push them to always go and look for firewood around, their locations. And this is something that brings this kind of tension between displaced people and also the host communities. And for quite long, I've seen people around me, and even myself sometimes, going around collecting firewood. And firewood is mainly one of the cooking fuel that is provided by the humanitarian agencies in displacement context. But most of the time, refugees find themselves running out of firewood after receiving it from the agency itself. and they have to look for solution. And this is something that comes back to women and also young girls, unfortunately, because they're the one holding that kind of responsibility, making sure that the family have or has something on the table after a long day, because most of the time refugees find themselves having just only access to one meal a day, and they have to make sure that they dedicate their time, they give on their life or even their future, their dreams and their aspirations, because they have to commit, they have to make sure that they dedicate their time collecting firewood. And this is really risky. I think one looking at the picture of a young girl or even a woman carrying firewood on her head, it's more than that, because it really involves a lot of emotion coming in, a lot of even physical things which is really not easy for one to carry for quite long. And this is something that affects refugees physically, and it also affects them beyond their time or the time that they're exercising this kind of practices. But also at the same time, maybe coming to lighting, for example, myself, I think I spent a lot of time, more than even 3 years, doing my studies online, and being in a remote area in a refugee camp whereby you can only access lights for less than 4 hours in a day. And this is mainly for local entrepreneurs who run small generators. And trust me, even if you have worked hard and at least make sure that you can have that little money to afford that light, it's not a guarantee for you to get it every day. And having that time, that commitment of making sure that every time you have to submit your assignment, you have to download materials, you have to attend classes online. It was really hard for being in such kind of environment and commit every time. And sometimes the outside people, or even people from places where they really don't understand if those kind of situation exists, they have had time to understand those kind of excuses. Every time you are like, I can't do this because of I didn't have power last night or the last 3 days. And I remember spending more than even 3 years, sometimes making sure that you sleep late, and you haven't done much in terms of commitment, in terms of goals, because the time that you can access power, it's really limited, unfortunately. And this is something that really affects and hinder the potential of refugees, because they have very limited time that they can afford, they can access power. And I mean, accessing power means accessing information, means accessing or unlocking even opportunities that you can't get around you. And this is something that affects really refugees. And that's what I can say in terms of context. And as I promised, I think I said I'll share with you some of the things that I recently came to realize that are really, are really making or even practitioners not to address the issue of displaced people and the energy more effectively. And one of the things is that the fact that energy is not formally recognized as, first-hand assistance that can be provided to refugees, it really is an issue, because energy in displacement is looked at as a luxury. Like, it's something that one can just get after making sure they have a shelter, they have, maybe security is also good, health is also secured at some point. So having light is not a priority in displacement context, and this makes the whole system really being very, very hard for refugees. The second thing is that most of the time refugees are not included into the national energy plan of the hosting of the countries where they're hosted. And this is one thing that really hinder their potential, as I mentioned early on. And then the other thing that also comes in is the issue of funding. A lot of energy projects are underfunded, and that makes, in terms of, prospects or even limitations, people are really limited, and even experts are really limited to what extent they can really address this issue. And also, maybe to some extent, there is also issue of data coming in. There are limited data in terms of how much is needed, how much is already there, and how people can really address this issue in terms of data, and also data that is available is not widely shared, and people are really facing that issue in terms of how to address this, the whole energy issue in displacement context. So yeah, that's what I can share, and happy to take any question moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joelle. I think that really, really helps paint the context for some of the challenges that are being faced, particularly by displaced people in terms of access to clean and affordable energy. I'm going to move now to Susie Wielden, also joining us virtually online today. Susie is the Head of Communications and Insight at Gogla. Susie, will you tell us, first of all, a little bit about Gogla and some of the challenges that your organization has identified and some of the work that you're doing to reach those who might otherwise be left behind in terms of those impoverished, those impacted most by climate, and those potentially in conflict areas, and the challenges that they face in terms of access to clean and affordable energy.
Yes, thank you so much. Indeed, my name's Susie Wielden. I'm the Head of Communications and Insights at Gogla, and Gogla is an association for off-grid solar companies, and they particularly create products and services targeted at those people living without electricity, particularly. So perhaps they have no electricity access at all, or indeed live in some of those areas of weak grid with insufficient supply. And the solutions that they've developed targeted for that audience are solar-based, solar energy kits such as household systems, systems for enterprises, solar lanterns, solar irrigation, where you might have a water source that would help to irrigate a smallholder farm, for example, solar refrigeration with the products being able to be better stored for enterprises, or store vaccine for health centers. And then some of the appliances as well that might be creating the services from those energy supplies. So, for example, very vital communication services, radios, televisions, mobile phones even, and allowing the people that will then be able to access those products to create more opportunities, perhaps tablets as well, or internet connection, as Joelle described, to have more ability to advance themselves, but also to stay connected, and perhaps in the environmental context, stay connected in terms of information that might be more about disaster response or emergency warning, etc. We've also been doing a lot of research in our area and intelligence to understand the impact of these different solutions and the number of people that have them, and those that have been currently left behind. And there's over 700 million people, in addition to those displaced people that Joel described, who currently have no electricity access today. And so they don't have the tools, and therefore then you can't power the services to adapt to climate impacts. And the majority of those people are in particularly climate vulnerable places, and therefore at risk of becoming displaced if they aren't already. So there's a real huge importance in terms of improving resilience and improving opportunity for those who are currently being overlooked in the clean energy transition. And off-grid solar is one of the most affordable and effective ways of reaching, I think data suggests, around half of those who are currently unelectrified. And then it will be hundreds of millions of more in terms of population growth over time. And so therefore it's vital to reach people with these solutions, but yet huge numbers cannot afford even these least cost products and services. So at Gogla, we work with our members and with our partners to try to develop initiatives and support innovations that will help to reach those. And I'll just share a quick couple now. One would be the work we've done around consumer protection. And a subset of that, actually, that I'll mention here is work we've done with pay-go providers. So an innovation in our space a number of years back was creating pay-as-you-go financing for off-grid solar solutions, which would mean that people could buy them over time rather than upfront. You can imagine a household that perhaps lives under or around the poverty line won't be able to pay for a $10 light, let alone a $50 system without some mechanism to help them in terms of that consumer financing. So the pay-as-you-go mechanism was particularly important in our space, very important as well, because it's serving an audience that perhaps doesn't have a credit history and has perhaps traditionally been unbanked as well. So being able to have this model, but to understand how to do it effectively, how not to overburden people by providing them with a product they can't afford to pay off, how to serve them properly as consumers of those products, and then how to hopefully move them up a clean energy staircase. Perhaps they are on a low income, they've started with a lantern, but how could you move that household or business to being able to have a better energy service? So that's where our consumer protection work also meets our access to finance work, in terms of working with partners to help sort of share insights that would allow them to develop financial innovations to perhaps provide more flexible financing to agrarian customers and consumers who have variable income sort of waves, and perhaps also sort of more de-risking finance, because of course these are very vulnerable and poor communities. And another area, recognizing that some people simply, even with a pay-as-you-go type of model or other innovations, simply cannot afford any energy access. They might not be paying now for electricity services, for example. We've also developed an end-user subsidy lab alongside the World Bank and NDEV and ASTAF, part of the FCDO programmatic scope, to look at smart designs to actually be able to sort of subsidize the cost of products for certain customers who just can't afford to access these vital pieces of solution. And so that lab looks at smart design to try to ensure that where those interventions are made, they can be as cost effective as possible. They don't disrupt what is happening in the kind of more commercial market, so to ensure that there is scale across both the subsidized and commercial as well. And what's very exciting about that particular initiative is that then the World Bank and NDEV and others who might be interested in learning from that are then already beginning to pilot or learning from pilots and innovations that are happening in that subsidy space to take the knowledge back into the lab and then use that to expand those kind of programs across more countries. So yeah, just a couple of examples and a bit of background in terms of GOGO.
Great, thank you so much. Turning now to Paula. Hi, Paula. Paula, is it Acevo or Acevo? Your surname, sorry. Acevedo. Thank you so much. Apologies. Paula is a data specialist with the Global Action Plan for Energy in Displacement for the GPA, UNITAR. And Paula, tell us a bit about bringing everyone together to achieve the objectives of SDG 7, so access to energy, particularly in displaced settings. GPA is also a new partner in the Transforming Energy Access program. So telling us a little bit about that inclusive partnership and some of the other various initiatives that GPA is working on to address the barriers and some of the information around the really fantastic Migration Multi-Partner Trust Fund.
Hello. My name is Paula Acevedo. I'm originally from Honduras, and I'm working with the GPA. The GPA stands for the Global Platform for Action on Sustainable Energy in Displaced Locations. And we are the one-stop shop for people that want to work to achieve SDG 7 in displaced locations. So we are talking about refugees, internally displaced people that are usually overlooked and not included in national access to electricity plans. And speaking from a data specialist, the numbers we have are from a few locations, from few refugee camps, and that is one of the biggest challenges we face in the sector. We need to know the situation, we need to know the current state to really address it efficiently and measure the change. And the biggest, the humanitarian agencies usually don't have the capacity and means to tackle this challenge in every country and the way it should be. So that is why the GPA was created, to bring all these agencies and stakeholders and practitioners that are working to achieve the SDG 7 in displaced locations and really work together to achieve it. To address this challenge, we have different initiatives. One of them is the READS program. Our job through this program is to look at 10 of the big countries facing migration and developing country roadmaps to see the gaps and viable projects, opportunities to increase energy access in these locations. We also include displaced researchers to really have an integral approach to the problem, to really include what is happening on site in the refugee camps. In this research focus, we also have the Include program, working with the wider Carbon Trust Transforming Energy Access program, the T partnership, to produce high quality research. It's a research focused program, and to support policy and decision making and mainstream these energy access needs with stakeholders, and also include displacement settings in the other T programs. These two initiatives address the barrier of lack of data availability in the sector, and we also have different initiatives. We published the State of the Humanitarian Energy Sector report this year, and we also see in this report all the barriers we have on data availability. Finally, the three big topics when we speak of energy access in displacement settings focus on, first, for the people in the ground, cooking is one of the most important topics, and we've heard in different panels here that sometimes many practitioners focus in energy access, and we have to give the importance to clean cooking solutions as well. And number two, electricity doesn't exist. The percentage of people without access to electricity only increases, and it's even seen as a luxury in some places. And speaking about the MPTF Trust Fund, diesel generators are used in these locations, and they are really expensive and they are not reliable. There are many challenges with these diesel generators, and also speaking with the carbon emissions side, they are really not. We need to use the solarization, the solar solutions we do have. So to address this, we have a separate program to get rid of all of them, and we have the multi-partner trust fund. And at 4:15 p.m. at the SDG Pavilion, we have a session focusing on this trust fund, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now on to Mr. Ayman Arabu.
Exactly.
Who is joining us this afternoon from ICLEI.
Yeah. So I work for ICLEI Africa, precisely. So we're a network of cities and local governments. So as our job mainly is to work with cities in general and local governments developing their urban strategies around sustainability and everything. So the idea is to bring all expertise from our network, share experiences, but also try to bring our skills and expertise by helping this, so our members basically, but also other cities that are willing to work on developing energy projects, capacity building for their team and also for people living there. So I think cities have a main role in bringing and addressing the SDG 7. I think now 50% of the people work in urban areas, and it's about to reach 70% in the next 20 years. And therefore, we need to recognize the role of cities in addressing energy access. And when it comes to informal settlements, we try to work on cities on their approach, basically. So it's a very difficult um, thematic and subjects because I think the main characteristics is that the city is not very present, so there isn't like um, yeah, it's built around outside the legal system and urban planning and so on, and that's a real problem. I think the second one is that the private sector is missing because now we need to take risk, obviously. And then the third thing, and for me personally, I think that's the most important, is that those people are very vulnerable. So I think that's one dimension that we need to understand is vulnerability. So they might come for different reasons, but they're the most impacted. Recently, we saw by COVID, for example, because there is no, basically, they're left behind, as we were saying. So at ICLEI, what we try to do is try to help our cities through COMSA, Governments of Mayor. So we're the focal point of COMSA by reviewing their urban strategies and try to include, try to have a strategy centered around people, try to bring the private sector and also have another approach to the urban systems. And concretely, we just launched a project called ENACT, and that stands for Energy Africa Cities and Transformative Energy. And basically, we're trying to build an environment that can create opportunities for the private sector to go and invest there. So basically, we try to draft TORs and grants that would bring service providers to work within this thematic and project. But also what we try to do is try to have a data-based approach. I think it's very important. As you said, there's like many reasons for people coming there, and African is huge and we have different contexts, and I think that's very important to bring people and to have to not have actually one strategy, basically. And that's why we're really keen to work with our cities and bring them and involve them and give them a bigger mandate because they're the ones actually able to solve the problem. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you so much. I think jumping back online now, we will be speaking to Joel. Hi, Joel. How are you doing today? Hi.
Yes, very well. So, thanks very much. Yeah. So I'm Joel. I'm Associate Director at Acumen for Energy Access for the Hardest to Reach. And a little bit about Acumen. We were established in 2001, and our founder, Jacqueline Novogratz, had the idea of really finding a third way to solve the challenges that are faced by people in poverty. A third way as compared to aid on one side, traditional aid, and traditional financial markets investing on the other. And that idea was patient capital. It's a way to sort of fuse the rigor and the accountability of the markets with the ethos and the flexibility of philanthropy, essentially. And so this is Acumen's work. That's what we do. We invest early stage capital in businesses, and we do this with a focus, as I say, on the challenges of poverty. We made our first investment in the energy access sector now 15 years ago in D-Light, which is an off-grid sector solar products provider. And now, a decade and a half later, we have invested in over 40 off-grid companies that have served over 220 million people and served over 220 million people and saved over 58 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So that's Acumen's work. In terms of the challenges, sort of accessing the hardest to reach, what we see is a necessary focus on both the financial and the social challenges. And framing it this way, I think, is important because financial interventions, and there are a few now, if they are purely driven by the considerations of finance, may lack some of the sustainability that's required and some of the inclusivity. And I think, meanwhile, the social interventions are very necessary too, but driven only by social intervention criteria may lack some of the scale. So holding those two together in mind, and hopefully not too much intention, is really critical, and it's part of really what drives Acumen's approach to these challenges. Thinking about what makes people hard to reach, why people are at risk of being left behind. Some of the work we've been doing is trying to understand the profile of the markets and these economies. There are some boundary conditions, I would say, that make entire economies at risk of being left behind. If you were to use certain criteria, for example, if you were to filter all of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa by those that have electrification rates below the sub-Saharan African average, and with poverty rates above 50%. So by poverty, I'm referring to the lower middle income line of $3.20 a day. You'd have a list of 22 countries. Each of them would be least developed economies. And you would see all of the sort of archetypal structural challenges that those types of economies have. So typically, again, lower school enrollment and literacy rates, weaker public institutions, a massive deficit of public infrastructure. The list is pretty, like I say, archetypal and pretty endless. And from the investor's perspective, what you have basically are the foundation of risk, hurdles that they need to overcome. And so it's useful to always think about, it's useful not to neglect the context in which energy access challenges are actually unfolding, which are broader economic development challenges. But then when you think at the sector level, it's also pretty common challenges that you observe. So flowing from those economic challenges are affordability challenges for these customers, for these potential customers, and also a very rural profile. So typically in areas where there is a sparsely populated region. When we're asking companies essentially to leave no one behind, we're asking them to face a tougher and more expensive operating environment, essentially. And it's a tougher and more expensive operating environment than many of them have to face if they were to simply consolidate in their existing markets, move their product profile upmarket as well, sort of upscale to more expensive appliances. That is an available option to many of these companies too. So, the challenge of leaving no one behind is really about aligning the interests of the shareholders of these companies and this challenge that is driving all of us here today. And why we think about that specifically at Acumen is then we understand that there's a role for capital to potentially play here. So, any financial solution that is going to tackle these challenges has to, harness the abilities of these operating companies, but also find ways to incentivize them. And I think if you think of where financial challenges and social challenges meet, it's where the locally owned companies also face challenges. Because in terms of raising capital, the data out of Susie's organization is that more than 90% of the capital going in to energy access, particularly on the debt side, is being taken up by the larger majority foreign-owned companies, right? And so there's some obvious sense behind that. Obviously, larger companies will need more capital, but in terms of the resilience, the stickability, the grassroots knowledge that these locally owned companies have, we really do need to harness that in any solution that's going to have long-term sustainability. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is thinking about how we can do all of this, how we can raise capital at scale, because that's one of the requirements, and also lower the cost of capital, because if we simply deliver capital on commercial terms to these companies, they will not survive in these challenging and expensive environments. And we need to do that, crowding in additional types of capital, but not simply finding a way to financially engineering a solution that provides acceptable risk returns profiles for these companies, for these investors, but actually deals with the underlying risks being faced by the companies on the ground. And when we think about that, it has blended finance, certainly, to crowd in this capital, to buy down some of the risk perception that they have, but also to accompany these enterprises with the kind of technical assistance that can tackle managing and assessing portfolio risk, consumer protection, as Susie was mentioning, and also being sustainable in terms of environmental waste, and the way they think about building out their companies in terms of operationally, and also some of that gender equality in terms of gender equality in the workforce, and making sure there aren't any biases on the way they treat their customers and the way that women experience their products and services as well. So it's a very holistic solution, potentially. And yeah, leaving no one behind really does require that kind of inclusive mindset, as I've sort of tried to pinpoint. So yeah, that's a little bit about Acumen and our approach.
Great, thanks so much, Joel. And moving back now to Joelle. So Joelle opened for us by stating the scene of some of her first-hand experience, but Joelle is also with GPA. She is their inclusivity specialist. And so she is going to expand a little bit around some of the data and research looking at displaced people and energy access. And also, again, building on some of the work that GPA is doing to ensure that no one is left behind in this context. So, Joelle, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me again in. Yes, maybe first of all, I started giving a few figures on what energy looks like. And in terms of cooking, yes, I mentioned that displaced people, like 81% of displaced people only have access to, cooking fuel. And this is basic cooking fuel and focusing on, firewood and also charcoal. But also for lighting, it's only 94% of displaced people. And 94% don't have access to enough power. So talking about enough power, I mean power probably to, electricity to power different devices that they can have or they can like to have in those, settings. But also coming to the work that GPA, we are trying to come up with in order to address this inclusivity issue and making sure that no one is left behind. We are trying to make sure that in our approach and also in our work, we deliver new research and data that will reduce barriers, limiting the inclusion of displaced people in policy and also decision-making on humanitarian energy. Because we feel like it's really important to include and make sure that refugees are at the center of any step that is probably required to make sure that refugees can have access to energy, also have access to decisions that are taken in the humanitarian sector. But also at the same time, we hope through our work and different activities that we are planning to demonstrate how the inclusion of displaced people works in practice and developing humanitarian energy policies and also problematic solutions, because there are things that some people are really skeptical to take, even to face, because they feel like it's really probably difficult. But having refugees having refugees at that high level and also giving them the opportunity to contribute to different policies, it's really something that we believe will work and will ensure that no one is left behind into this journey. But also, we hope to even invest into targeted advocacy, also technical advice, and also knowledge sharing experience out of this experience, because we feel like, as Paola mentioned, there is that issue of data and also information sharing across the sector, and we hope to bridge this or to address this issue through different activities that will be able to run out of this. But also from my own experience, finding myself into this space, I think my displacement background and also my status really informed some of the things that I come up with to help the community or even help my colleagues in terms of what are the intervention that you're trying to come up with, and how we'll ensure that different things are taken into consideration in order to make sure that we promote inclusion into our approach. regardless of the background that people have, because sometimes having that mindset of where people are coming from, what is the literacy level, really, trigger or even inform some of the things that people are taking in terms of decision. But we are really trying hard to make sure that through our advocacy, through our work and different initiatives that we are taking, we have that aspect of inclusion, making sure that refugees are part of the the decision making, part of the policy, and also part of the entire ecosystem, so that they can be able to play a key role as they are at the center of everything, and they understand better their situation, also what can be the solution in their case. So that's what is happening, and we hope through our work we'll be able to address different issues that the sector is still struggling with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joelle. Sorry, speaking of energy access issues, my battery was going to die, so I'm just making sure I've got a reflection of the program that I can refer to if it dies. But thank you, I think, to each of the panelists. I think you've set a really good overview of some of the challenges that are being faced, but also some of the innovation that's being brought to bear to deal with these challenges. And it sounds really exciting in many respects. I think at this point in the program, we're opening up for Q&A to the audience. And we'll also see if there are any questions online that we can bring in. But I think first to the floor, are there questions for any of the panelists? You've all explained yourselves so well that nobody has any questions. I'm just quickly going to double check online, just to see if we do have any questions coming through. Sorry, bear with me. I don't see any online. So maybe let me follow up then with a broad question, I suppose, because I think it's applicable in all of the work that all of you are doing. And it speaks, I think, going back to some of your last points, Joelle, around inclusivity. And to what extent is there consultation and engagement with those who are affected, be they displaced persons or, people who just generally lack access? Because I imagine in as much as energy is a challenge for these people, it's also a challenge for them to be aware of a lot of things happening, that they're typically not going to see the advert on somebody's website that says, we're planning to do this and please come to the town hall to talk about it. And so how do we ensure that we are engaging with those who are actually affected by some of the innovations and policy changes we're looking to make in this space? Anybody want to go first? Yeah, please, go ahead.
I think I'll go first because I'll have the easiest answer. So we're a network of cities and local governments, and for us it's easier to really work on a small scale and delve down, go talk with communities, listen to what are their problems, understand their vulnerabilities, as I said. And yeah, I should emphasize on that particularly because we have many types, as you said, inclusivity. We have the thing is that the problem of informal settlements has other impacts. So we have gender issues because mainly 85% of time is the women or girls who goes look for other ways of energy, basically. And we have displacement. So these are people that are not accepted either politically or ethnically or whatever. And that's why it's very important that all our strategies are centered around them. Yep. Thank you. And so we have a project in Freetown. So and we launched a consultative campaign with people, and they came up with this slogan, and I thought it's very nice. And it's like, take the slum from the people and let the people from the slum, because sometimes, and actually it's often the case, all strategies are not focused around people, and you just end up having other problems and creating other vulnerabilities again. So yeah, it's a very important point.
So with the GPA and the projects we're working with, we really, first in the READS program, I'm working with Joel in that one as well. We are including displaced researchers in the development of the roadmaps. And also we are working with the Global Refugee Network. So I believe that building these networks is the best way to include the most people we can. Also, we work with the Humanitarian Energy Exchange Network, and practitioners, stakeholders form part of these meetings, and they speak about the different projects they are developing. But I do believe to really include the people on the refugee camps in these locations, the work, like including them, the displaced researchers, really is a way to not only listen to these big agencies, but really listen to the people that are on site.
Yes, yeah, there we go. Online, turning back to you, Susie or Joel or Joelle, any further insights?
I can jump in from the lighting side of things. We have in our members are companies that are selling off-grid solar products, and they're having a continuous interaction with their customers. They need to obviously create the supply that fills the demand that's there, and understand from their customers what those biggest needs are. And I think there's a lot of agents who are selling products, and they feed information back to their organizations and through their teams to ensure that the products are fit for purpose and they're meeting the needs of their local audiences. But in addition to that, I think it is also critically important to try to both hear from consumers or potential consumers of lighting products why they would like to access those products, or why they don't access those products as well. What's stopping them. And we've seen a couple of successful programs sort of previously in the evolution of the sector, particularly Lighting Global, Lighting Asia and Lighting Africa, ran awareness campaigns where they shared information about different products with potential consumers, and got that sort of immediate and real-time feedback. And I think that really helped to catalyze the off-grid solar market. And I think in some of the countries that Joel mentioned, where we don't have working markets, where the REACH program will try to create new momentum and new access, I think having some consideration as to how we raise awareness of the potential of different technologies, and indeed begin to learn from the audiences within those countries, I think could be super valuable as well. Because perhaps in those countries where products are better known, there is more awareness. You might see something in the news or hear through the grapevine or your local networks, but for those countries where we don't see active off-grid markets and we don't see active off-grid programs to the extent that we might in others, then, and also perhaps for those newer technologies like productive use assets, where there's a huge impact potential in terms of smallholder farmers being able to irrigate their crops better and more continuously, particularly hugely important in the context of climate change, where we're seeing increased drought and slower rainfall. But the technologies are newer, so we have to again go to interacting with more customers and learning from communities, and learning and sharing about the opportunity there, that people can realize the products are available. So I do think some of those learning and awareness raising programs are going to be vital in the years ahead as well.
Great, thanks so much. We do have some questions that have come through online, so I'm just going to read them out and address them maybe particularly. So Joel, one for you. A question is, what is the best way for a company that has an innovative solution to approach Acumen to get funding?
I don't know if I should just put my name and number in the chat here. So Acumen has, it depends obviously where this individual's business is located. but we have offices around the developing economies of the world. In Africa, we have two, one in East Africa in Nairobi and one in West Africa in Lagos. We also have offices in New York and in London. We have teams that travel, and that's not to exclude our offices in Pakistan, our offices in India, our offices in Latin America as well. So we believe it's super important for us to be closest to the companies and to the people that we're going to serve with our products. That kind of goes back to that previous question on how it is that we learn about the solutions that we're investing in, so that they're fit for purpose. To respond concretely to the questioner's answer, please do get in contact with me after this, and I'd be happy to. But typically, Acumen is open doors in terms of hearing from companies that believe they've got innovative solutions that have even very early stage ideas that we think can make a dent in the challenges of poverty, primarily around energy access, agriculture, sometimes healthcare and education technologies. Yeah, we're an open door.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. I suppose a question for Paula or Joelle more particularly, although I do have a pointed question for you, Paula, coming up next. So maybe, Joelle, you can take the first one. And so I know you have mentioned some of the efforts you're making already and leveraging off existing networks, etc. But the question is, how can you do more to get better data and information sharing to ensure that we leave no one behind?
Sure, thank you so much for the question. I think definitely there are so many things that are needed in terms of, effort toward making sure that we have data that represent well the situation. But one of the approach is that, of course, we need different joint efforts coming to this point. In terms of data, in terms of, donors, we need more funding to conduct data to make sure that we can access places that we don't have information about, and make sure that we have really information that can represent well the situation of those places. But at the same time, we also need, sometimes policy comes in terms of how to access, places. And researchers in the field find this a bit difficult because it's more of, limitations in terms of, topics, in terms of places you can access. So we need also more of, policy that really accommodates, really make the work, a bit feasible, so that researchers can also have access to those places and collect data. But also we need to work, closely in the sector, like in the humanitarian sector, let me say that, sharing data, having a database where, different people can have access to different informations and different data that are available in the sector, so that we avoid that issue of duplications, issue of making, going again back to the same thing while there is data available, so people can build on what is existing already and work to ensure that they're addressing issues that are not really tackled, or issues that are really, displaced people are still facing currently. So I think those are the things that I can share, and maybe Paola will be well placed to add more, since she's, focusing on data that much. Thank you.
Thanks, Joelle. And yes, absolutely, Paula, if you want to add to that, but let me also give you the final question, I think, for this panel, and then we'll look to wrap up, because we do also have a really interesting video that we want to share with our audience in person and online. So, Paula, it's quite a big question, but if you can answer as simply as possible. How has the Transforming Energy Access program supported research and innovation with the GPA? And can you share any insights or methodologies to include people in displaced settings in the wider Transforming Energy Access projects and programs?
So adding a little bit to what Joelle said, and to include displaced people, yeah, the second part of the question, I do believe the networks are important, and also echoing on what Joel said, working to more closely together in the sector, really, well, not repeating projects, not repeating these data collections, just work more closely so we can approach it the best way we can. I feel like there are different projects in different countries, and I feel sometimes if we would work together and really join these different networks where these practitioners, these agencies share what they are doing, we could replicate these projects in other countries with similar contexts, and really bring together all this data available. And talking specifically with the T partnership, I could connect the person to the person working directly with the T partnership. It's really mostly a research program to include more detailed, high-quality research. I don't know if Joel would like to add also in this question with the T partnership, and yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think, yes, I can just add a few words. Definitely the T focus is mainly making sure that we have quality data, that is highlighting, how we can bring in refugees, and not just having that kind of tokenistic approach or extracting approach in terms of data and knowledge, but also engaging them more closely into the work that we're doing, but also at the same time having them with us. And approve of the work that we're doing at the GPA, being a refugee and also working to making sure that we have solutions that will fit or address well the issue of refugees. And yeah, that's what I can definitely share. Thank you.
Great, thank you very, very much. So I'm going to try and also very briefly sort of summarize some of what we've spoken about today, some of the interesting points that have been raised. So we've heard from our panelists that are working across a really diverse range of areas, from an urban setting to potentially more rural settings, to areas where there are humanitarian crises, where there are refugees potentially. And in all of these cases, these are very vulnerable people who lack energy access or access to affordable and clean energy. So it's really, really important. And I think what we've underpinned is the importance of the different mechanisms that can be leveraged to help improve access to energy and to clean energy access. And that very clearly has come through in terms of the data and the knowledge sharing. And I think that that's like much of anything that we try and work on, where it's very difficult to manage or to improve on things that you can't measure. So I think that is critically important. Joel spoke to us about the importance of bringing to bear some innovative financial measures to also battle these challenges, looking beyond what we traditionally think of in this space. So, and I think that's also very critically important. I think I'll leave it there. I mean, as I say, there were so many very interesting points and threads to pick up on. We could probably be here for ages, but I think a very, very good talk, and I'd like to thank all the panelists in person and online for joining us. As I say, we do have a very interesting video, so please do stay online or in the room and have a look. Thank you very much, everybody.
guys if you can afford to help refugees who are in the camp, because in terms of education and even health sector, we need more energy.
أطالب الحكومات والجهات المختصة صناع القرارات بأن يعتمدوا على مصادر متجددة وغير ضارة للبيئة. كون العراق يعاني جدا من ارتفاع أسعار الكهرباء، فأتمنى أنه تعتمدون على الشمس اللي وجودها كثيف بالعراق.
I would like to ask the government, world leaders, policy makers pertaining to energy in my context. Energy efficiency can deliver immediate results by lowering demand, while also putting us on the journey to longer-term gains. In that way, innovations could be ramped up, energy efficiency, not in theory, but in practice by all categories of youth and women.
My request to the global leader is to provide clean energy to promote decent life among refugees.
So when we are coming to government policies, we also ask the government also to allow the movement of energy products freely. Energy goods can be moved freely so that it can reach where the people is.
What I want the government to do and all the stakeholders, the policymakers to do is to promote the development of new energy sources and technologies by investing in energy.
Kitu naweza nikasi watu support na wasapoti zile kampuni. Huko mtu anaweza kuwa na pesa yake anataka asaidie wakimbizi, lakini ile pesa yake ni kidogo. Ukiona anakuja mbele yako kwa ofisi ana apply, msapoti ainue wale wakimbizi wengine. Juu maisha ya ukimbizi ni maisha magumu sana.
Aujourd'hui, je pouvais peut-être recommander quelque chose d'importance au gouvernement qui nous reçoivent, nous qui sommes réfugiés dans le monde. Si nos bailleurs de fonds peuvent accorder des fonds pour nous procurer de l'énergie, soit solaire, soit électricité, ça peut vraiment nous aider beaucoup plus. Et cela nous aidera de vivre dans des climats là un peu sains, parce que nous éviterons même de l'insalubrité. Quand nous utilisons des braises et autres, il y a l'insalubrité qui nous poursuit un peu partout. Vous verrez que nous mangeons très tardivement, et même la nourriture qui n'est pas bien propre suite à la façon dont elle a été préparée. C'est pourquoi je voudrais prier ou négocier même, aller jusqu'au point de retrouver comment nous pouvons être procurés de l'énergie dans des différents camps de réfugiés. Si possible, l'énergie solaire qui est durable par rapport à des histoires que nous utilisons. Parce que vous verrez souvent, il y a des petites torches au marché. Vous l'achetez aujourd'hui, demain, c'est déjà à lambeau et c'est plus facile aux enfants de perdre et d'abîmer. Mais quand il y a l'énergie solaire, ce système-là est très persistant. C'est-à-dire, vous pouvez même faire 2-3 ans avec ce même système-là.
الطاقة هي مهم للطلاب في دراستهم، وأنا أن أشهد قضاء العالم للتعرف بتحسن وصول الطاقة للاجئين والنازحين.
My message to the global leaders, if possible, kindly duplicate these services, this energy to other refugee places. It brings a lot of development. It brings a lot of changes, like in Galobe that we have seen, even the growth of our economy, it has some positive impact.